Finding new ESL students is hard, but if you're constantly having to find new students just to keep your teaching schedule full, finding students might not be your biggest problem. Because every time a student leaves, you have another empty space to fill. And of course, students leave for all kinds of reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with us. Schedules change, families move, children's interests change, budgets change, but there are also things we can do as independent teachers that make students much more likely to stay. And some of them have surprisingly little to do with how entertaining today's lesson was. So today we're looking at 5 mistakes that can quietly hurt student retention, including one I think good teachers sometimes make precisely because we're trying so hard to give our students great lessons. If you're new here, I'm Megan. I'm a teacher, curriculum developer, and creator of Florentis Learning. I also teach independently myself, so student retention isn't just something I think about from a curriculum perspective. It's something that matters in my own teaching business too. And before we get into that number one, I want to make an important distinction. Keeping students does not mean trying to prevent every student from ever leaving. Sometimes a student has achieved what they came to you for. This is really common with test prep students. Sometimes you're simply not the right teacher for the student, and sometimes the student is not the right student for you. That's okay. What we're talking about today is creating the kind of teaching experience where students are making progress, parents understand the value they're receiving, and continuing with you makes sense. And the first mistake is a big one. You can be an absolutely fantastic teacher and still accidentally create a learning experience that feels disconnected. Imagine I have an 8-year-old student. Let's call her Lily. On Monday, Lily has a fantastic lesson about animals. Next time, I play this really fun game about food. Then we do a space lesson because she loves space. And after that, I find a really cute activity for practicing past tense. None of these lessons is necessarily bad. Lily might enjoy every single one of them. But after 3 months, her parents could reasonably ask me, what is Lily actually progressing toward? That's a much harder question. There is a huge difference between having great lessons and having a learning journey. A curriculum isn't just a collection of materials. There should be some relationship between what the student could do when they started, what you're teaching now, and what you want them to be able to do next. That doesn't mean you can never deviate. If Lily is obsessed with space, wonderful, just use that interest. But the topic of the lesson and the learning goal aren't necessarily the same thing. Maybe we're using space to practice describing things. Maybe we're working on comparative adjectives and looking at the distance between planets and comparing features of planets. Maybe we're developing reading comprehension, and again, still using space, we can be reading about it. The fun can continue, and the learning continues to build. This is one of the reasons I'm a little obsessive about learning paths in Florentis. I want a teacher to be able to see where a student is, where they're heading, and what an appropriate next step might be. Because I don't want teachers sitting down every Sunday thinking, what am I going to teach Lily this week? But regardless of what curriculum you use, ask yourself, if a parent asked me what we're working toward right now, could I answer clearly? If not, that's the first thing I'd fix. Now let's say Lily is making progress. There's another problem. Her parents might have absolutely no idea. This happens really easily in online ESL. After class we say, Lily did a great job today. Next week we say, wonderful class, she participated really well. Then, she's becoming much more confident. All lovely things to hear, but what do they actually tell Lily's parent about her English? Not very much. Imagine that instead we could say, when Lily started, she usually answered comprehension questions with 1 or 2 words. We're working on expanding those answers into complete sentences, and she's now doing that independently with familiar questions. That's progress a parent can understand. Or At the beginning of this unit, Lily needed support to use the past tense. She's now using regular past tense verbs independently, and we're starting to work on irregular forms. Now, I haven't just told the parent Lily is doing well. I've shown them what has changed. You don't need to write a formal report after every class, but over time, parents should be able to see where did we start, what have we worked on, what's improving, and what are we working toward next. This is something I've been building much more deliberately into my own systems as well, tracking what students are working on and creating progress reports that actually communicate that journey to parents. Because if a parent can't see the progress, they may eventually start wondering what they're paying for, even when the teaching itself is excellent. This is something that I've built into the Florentis Teacher Hub. If you're using the Florentis Learning Curriculum, you might have noticed that there's a new little box to click when you log your lesson notes. And you're just choosing, it's very quick, not demonstrated, needs support, demonstrated independently. You just rate it, and all of that will be able to be used to be pulled into a regular progress report. Now, here's the opposite problem. You have a beautifully structured curriculum. Lesson 24 is finished, therefore, lesson 25. Except Lily struggled through lesson 24. She couldn't produce the target language independently. She was frustrated, you were frustrated, but the curriculum says lesson 25 is next. So off we go. That's not really individualized teaching, and the curriculum should support your professional judgment, not replace it. Sometimes the right next step is the next lesson. Sometimes it's review. Sometimes it's additional conversation practice. Sometimes it's an ESL reader. Sometimes you just need to slow down. Sometimes you need to skip something because the student has already mastered that. And sometimes you discover that the level you started with wasn't quite right. This is particularly important when you're teaching privately because individualization is one of our biggest advantages. We're not trying to move 30 children through the same textbook on the same Tuesday afternoon. We can respond to the learner who's in front of us. And if you're building your own independent teaching business right now, this is exactly the kind of decision you suddenly find yourself responsible for. I have a completely free Start Teaching Independently course that walks you through much more of the business and teaching setup. I'll link that below if you're at that stage. But whatever system you build, leave room in it for yourself to be the teacher. Mistake number 4. This one isn't really about teaching. You can deliver an excellent lesson and still create a frustrating experience for the family. The parent doesn't know when payment is due. They aren't sure how many classes that they have left. The Zoom link changes every week. They don't know your cancellation policy. You forget to send the feedback you promised. They message you to ask when the next lesson is. And individually, none of these things seem catastrophic. But together they communicate this is difficult to manage. As independent teachers, we're not only responsible for what happens during the 25 or 30 minutes we're teaching, we're responsible for the entire experience surrounding the lesson too. That doesn't mean you need complicated software. It means you need consistency. One place to find the lesson link, a predictable payment process, clear policies, reliable communication method, a way to know how many lessons a student has remaining, and a simple record of what you've taught. This is something that you can find in the Florentis Teaching Hub. I've been sharing more of the actual systems and tools I use to manage this side of independent teaching. So if that's useful to you, subscribe, because I firmly believe we should spend more of our time teaching and less of it trying to remember whether somebody has 3 classes left or 4. And sometimes they might only have 3 left and you've now given them 4 and you've just finished teaching a lesson for free. So mistake number 5 might be the most important one. Imagine Lily's family buys a package of 20 lessons. We teach lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3, all the way to lesson 19, and then suddenly send, "Hi, Lily has 1 lesson remaining. Would you like to purchase another package?" That should not be the first time the parent has been invited to think about Lily's progress. Compare that with this. When Lily starts, we establish a starting point, we identify a goal, and throughout the lessons, the family gets useful feedback. Periodically, I show them progress, And as Lily improves, we identify the next goal. So when we reach the end of the package, renewal isn't, would you like to buy another 20 classes? It's, Lily has made great progress with X. We've started working on Y, and the next thing I'd like to help her with is Z. Now the next package has a purpose. The parent knows where Lily has been, they know where she is now, and they know where you're preparing to take her next. Retention isn't something you start thinking about when there's 2 lessons left. You build it throughout the entire relationship. And this is where curriculum, assessment, feedback, and parent communication all start working together. So let's bring these 5 together. Students are more likely to stay when their lessons form a learning journey, their progress is visible, the teaching responds to their actual individualized needs, working with you feels organized and consistent, and the value of continuing is clear before renewal ever comes up. None of that requires you to be a salesperson, and in fact, I think it's almost the opposite. You're showing the family that you understand their child, you have a plan, and you're paying attention to whether that plan is actually working. Now, if you're watching, I'd really like to hear from experienced independent teachers on this one. If you've taught the same student for a year or longer, what do you think has made that teaching relationship last? Is it the relationship with the student, communication with the parent, curriculum, consistency, progress, something completely different? Tell us in the comments. I think that newer independent teachers could learn a lot from seeing what has actually worked for other teachers. And if you're watching this because you're still trying to get your independent teaching business started, I have 2 things for you. First, my Start Teaching Independently course is completely free, and I'll put that in the description below. But I'd also like you to watch this video next. I'll walk through the 7 things I'd focus on if I were building an independent ESL teaching business today. From deciding who to teach, choosing curriculum, to pricing, technology, and finding your first students. So if you're still building those foundations, start there next.